The next day, I had an interview set up in Rwanda, across the border from Goma, is a town called Gisenyi. This meeting never happened, and for whatever reason, it wasn't meant to happen, because as I sat waiting for the girl, there was one man sitting there using the Wi-Fi at this hotel restaurant, and we striked up a conversation of sorts. I showed him my paintings, just explained what I was doing. He showed me his pieces of paper with a list of children's names. What I came to find out later is this man, his name is Kazungu Hubert, and he's been looking after 16 children who are orphans due to different reasons, but many that are due to the ongoing war happening in the Congo. So that was it. I thought that was, I had no way of knowing how this would affect the rest of my life in the next 5 years. But we exchanged emails and we started corresponding. And what Kazungu said, yes, it's very important to let people know what's happening to the women. And it's horrible. But do you know what happens to the children of those women? And then he went on to educate me and teach me and share stories with me. He had been given land, donated land to build a home for these children he had been looking after. And the day the M23 invaded Goma, I had this overwhelming instinct that I needed to do something to help. I had just launched my Women of East Africa art show, and I was donating half the proceeds back to different charities. And I decided I'm going to send this man money to help him build this orphanage, this home for these children. I shared this story with my family and a couple of friends, and by the end of the day I had enough money to build that home. And by the time the home was built, 1 year, January 12th to the date that I met Kazungu, there were 80 children. That mainly due to the M23 invasion of all the communities that had run to Goma. Many of these children have come from the IDP camp, which was set up at this time. And they moved in 1 year to the date that I met Kazungu. I knew my next show would be the children from the Congo. It wasn't the obvious progression. I started painting those paintings right away. Kazungu actually sent me the first 16 children, their pictures, and I started painting from his photographs to begin. I went back in 2014, January, and I met the children for the first time, and I got to see the orphanage for the first time. It was overwhelming. It was again, the courage that these children and women have. It's such a contrast to the story because the emotion is always uplifted and happy. So you live sort of in this between emotion. I came home and I started painting for this art show in the springtime. And I was painting away. I had 15, 16 paintings finished. And it was 2 weeks before my show. And I felt good about them. I was excited to share the stories. The project in Goma, the Chikudu Kids' home, was growing. We now had a fence and latrines and a kitchen and water catchment. So this was growing at the same time as these paintings were growing. I laid them out on the floor in my studio in different rows, taking fun pictures of them to help promote my show. And I laid them in a square, 5, 5, 5. And I stood back and I realized at that moment that it was one big painting and that I had to paint all 80. and that I couldn't sell them until this whole installation was created. It's sort of the last 20 years of being an artist all came swirling together at that moment. I felt emotional, but so clear and so motivated and so inspired. I had that show. A few weeks later, I painted more of those children with energy, knowing where I was going. And the overwhelming response to the work, the wall, the project, to the idea, to moving forward was overwhelming. I decided then to offer an opportunity for people to sponsor the children. And within 4 months, all 80 children were sponsored. When I was at the orphanage, just 6 months before or 5 months before, a friend of mine, Kathy Cleary, came, and she, for the first time, came into the orphanage, and 10 women were waiting to speak to us, to tell us their stories, because Kazungu knew we wanted to hear these stories. And we were completely not prepared. We didn't know it was even happening, but we went and we sat in a room and we listened to 10 horrific stories of rape, of murder, of I can't even speak the words, because I would be speechless. The courage that it took for those women to come and tell their stories, but what every woman wanted was peace. And they believed if they told their story, that anyone who listened would have to do something. So we took it on. We said, yeah, we agree, and that's what we can do. That's my tool. I'm an artist. I want to share stories. And Kathy came home saying, I have to do something for these women. And she asked Kazungu what the women wanted. They shared what they wanted, and she ended up founding the Chikudu Women's Training Center. And on our last return, just a year after, the women had just graduated from their first year of training. And the difference in those women, in the spirit, in the hope, in the community, was beyond anything we could ever imagine. So there's a lot of emotion. I mean, it's just, but it never really feels this heavy until I tell the story, because the amount of support that's come barreling in for what we're doing, and the passion behind it, the truth behind it, it just propels us forward. I never would have taken anything like this on. I wouldn't have believed that this was possible. But every step of the way, things just fall into place. So I rarely feel the weight of it on my shoulders. It's nothing but pure inspiration and people coming together, connecting, doing the right thing, doing whatever they can to help, because it's the right thing to do. And through myself and Kazungu, we've been able to create this direct access to doing, to helping, to, at the grassroots level as possible, where every cent is going to the project. Now the orphanage has grown to a women's center, an agriculture project, and we're building 2 schools this year. We bought land and we're building 2 schools. And the idea there is that all the children from the Chikudu home can go to school, which is now 100 children. The children of the women from the Women's Training Center can go to the school. Children in the community, the welcome families who are fostering the children that don't live in the house, can go to the school. So what it's going to pull up the whole community together. And you can already see just from the orphanage and the women's center how that's happening already. So I know now that by stepping out that day and saying, use me, was meant to be.